The first thing you notice out here is not the silence, but the weight of the sky pressing down on a sea of black basalt. Every rock underfoot was once liquid fire, a frozen scream from deep within the earth that now stretches into a void of jagged stone. You walk across this charred landscape until the modern world dissolves into a shimmering mirage of heat and dust. And there, without warning, the stones begin to speak, not in words, but in an almost perfect ring of darkness laid bare upon the cracked terrain. It is just a simple circle of rough-hewn black basalt blocks, half swallowed by millennial winds and drifting sand. Some stones stand on their edges like ancient teeth, while others have fallen inward as if reaching for something lost in the center. In every direction, the Harat al-Sham lava field runs to the horizon, a desolation so absolute it feels sacred. Yet someone, at some forgotten moment in prehistory, walked into this furnace and decided to build a doorway to nowhere. You stand inside the ring as the afternoon heat yields to a sudden desert chill, and an unreasonable question forms in your mind. Why here? Why did they haul these heavy iron-hard stones into a perfect geometry that stares silently at the abyss? The landscape offers no water, no shelter, and no comfort, only an emptiness that swallows reason whole. This is the domain of the black stone circles of Jordan, crude, eloquent, and brutally resistant to every attempt at explanation. Archaeologists refer to them as part of the works of old men, a sprawling complex of mysterious desert structures spanning across Arabia. But the locals know better than to speak of the dead in such casual terms, and the Bedouin have their own careful names for these forgotten rings. Some they call the houses of spirits, others they call the tents of a vanished people who traded the heavens for sleep in the basalt. To understand the breadth of the enigma, we must first strip away the romance and examine the hard, physical evidence that refuses to cooperate. Hundreds of these dark rings speckle the volcanic uplands, from the Jordanian Black Desert into territories where few archaeologists dare to tread. The construction is deeply paradoxical. The stones are unworked lumps of ferruginous basalt, some weighing as much as a grown man. Yet they were arranged into circles with diameters as wide as 30 meters, their perimeters punctuated by a single thin gate-like opening. The bedrock beneath them is often so rugged that modern surveyors stumble, yet the ancient builders somehow chose clear geometric points. Dating these structures has pushed scientific methodology to its tearing point, offering only ambiguous windows strewn across millennia. Some researchers propose that the circles guard the bones of the late Neolithic, 5,000 to 8,000 years before our own anxious clockwork. Others, examining a deeper patina and the drift of a wandering North Star, whisper that some may be far older than the dawn of Sumer. Time itself decays differently here. The sun shatters stone into a varnish too dark for lichen, too sterile for the simple archaeologist's carbon dream. When the first aviators of the 1920s flew over this biblical wilderness, they spotted the huge rings from the air and christened them kites without knowing why. These converging walls, sometimes kilometers long, funneled inward toward pits and precipices, complicating the picture with the stench of an ancient slaughter. On the ground, you can still find the delicate flint tools of the master hunters who once sharpened their blades under a merciless sun. So the first comfortable theory was born. Surely, these were nothing more than gargantuan game traps designed to drive gazelle herds toward a central killing pit. The black rings, according to this logic, served as a gathering ground where the hunters prepared their ambush under cover of darkness. In the Museum of Dry Logic, it is a clean explanation. But the stones themselves refuse to hold that singular function with any grace, because here is where the labyrinth begins to twist. Many circles lack the long drive walls completely, solitary and self-contained like meditation wheels. Moreover, why would a purely practical hunting society toil to arrange these dense boulders with such precise, enduring geometry? A simple mound of dirt or a wooden blind would have sufficed to hide a trembling spear, yet they chose a monolith to mark a breath held in eternity. The stones are not random. They align with a precision that feels intentional, magnetic, and deeply estranged from the needs of a butchering sight. On the winter solstice, the shadow of a central boulder might slice through the narrow gate and touch the very heart of the ring before fading into night. This has led the surveyor scholars to propose a second, more celestial layer, a ritual calendar carved from volcanic glass under an ocean of stars. The desert sky here is a spectral wonder, a violent clarity where the Milky Way does not just hang above, but seems to pour down into the stones like liquid phosphorus. Ancestral minds, shaped by a profound fear of a darkening heaven, may have built these rings to mimic the eternal circles painted in the cosmos. Where the pragmatic theory of hunters' traps collides with the poetry of star worship, we find ourselves stranded in the center of a frustrating silence. A profound counter-theory rises from the volcanic soil itself, one that suggests the rings are not for killing or charting, but for bridging. Let us consider the basalt once more. Volcanic stone is heavy with iron, an ancient directional magnet whispering to navigators and spiritualists alike. Some archaeologists theorize that these structures were liminal spaces where the living could leave their dirt-stained world and enter a realm of incorporeal ancestors. The single door always faces away from the harsh prevailing wind. Perhaps it faces toward an underworld entrance, a specific mountain, or a star on the axis of the dead. Inside these trembling boundaries, funerary cairns have occasionally been found, holding the cremated remains of people whose names dissolved long before writing. But this only deepens the riddle. Were they built to house the dead, or was the dead's presence used to sanctify a purpose we no longer recognize? As the ancient green Sahara turned to rust and dust, resources collapsed, and these rings became altars of desperation to call back the rain. You can almost feel it when the thunder rolls over the far hills, the frantic dance of a parched priest trying to spin magic into a sky of parched clay. We are reading a crushed library where only the dark bindings remain. The black basalt covers that protected a story long turned to floating ash. The Bedouin nomads who navigate this brutal terrain with a grace born of hardship hold their own fragmented lore about these rings. They speak of the jinn, the smokeless fire spirits who built such places out of hatred for the sun and love for the cold whisper of the night wind. A tribesman might sit with you beside a circle at twilight, and with a low, serious reverence, he will tell you that these stones hum when the moon rises. He is not joking. He is revealing a cultural memory that has spent 1,000 years refracting through the crystal of supernatural awe. The hum of the stones may be a folk echo of a time when these rings served as desert drums, beaten to send messages rolling across the empty, soundless plains. Then again, it might be a simple scientific truth. Rapid cooling of the basalt at sunset often causes a subtle crackling, a mineral whisper lost on busy, deaf minds. You are not out here for the debunking. You are out here because the boundary between the drum and the demon has collapsed into a beautiful, terrifying mist. Consider the massive effort involved. The transportation of these multi-ton blocks across a razor-sharp lava field with no beasts of burden but human skin and bone. This was a communal obsession, a project that likely spanned generations, a purpose so gripping that it made a fiery wasteland feel like the center of the universe. They built in the wrong place for convenience, but in the perfect place for significance. And that is a distinction that demands we respect their ancient cognition. Some university teams have tried to replicate the dragging of a single basalt slab across the jagged terrain using ropes and sheer manpower under the Jordanian sun. The experiment ended in exhausted, sweat-soaked failure that sent the doctoral students back to their air-conditioned tents with bleeding hands and bruised logic. If it tortures the modern flesh so mercilessly, what divine fire possessed the Neolithic heart to do it again and again, hundreds of times, for no obvious gain? The answer likely resides in a realm of human experience that archaeology is terrified to touch. The raw, irrational need to create a monument against non-existence. A basalt circle is not a shelter. It is a defiant shout laid flat upon the earth, a declaration that we were here, and the darkness will not take us without a fight. Some of the stones bear faint, ambiguous cup marks, small round depressions worn into the rusted surface by unknown tools, rubbing unknown substances. A lonely researcher once proposed that these tiny bowls once held the blood of sacrificial goats, or perhaps the simple water offerings of a mother who lost a child to the lava. We cannot know, and that incapacity has driven a specific breed of obsessive mind directly into the harrowing silence of the Black Desert, never to return quite whole. There is a distinct psychological weight that settles on the visitor standing inside a 7,000-year-old geometry. It humbles the intellect and electrifies a deeper animal instinct. The archaeologist who spends decades cataloging these rings often develops a paradoxical blend of mathematical rigor and a quiet, unsettling mysticism. You see it in their notebooks, adrift from measurements of azimuths to feverish sketches of the play of shadow on the gate at dawn. They confess privately that the stones know something about the ancient soul that the academic journals refuse to publish. A wisdom buried in the magnetic pull of the iron. One can imagine the fate of the last worshipper, the keeper of the ritual when the climate finally broke and the great drought swallowed the springs of humanity. Perhaps he sat in the center of his black circle, watching a merciless sun bleach the world, waiting for a sign that never came, clutching a flint blade that had lost its god. His bones are indistinguishable from the dust now, but the ring he built persists as a perfect hollow monument to a hope that outlived its own meaning. It is this emptiness that haunts the Bedouin guides who lead you out here. They will wait at a respectful distance, never sleeping inside the circle of the jinn. They observe your fascination with a look of pity and concern, for they know the desert loves nothing more than to steal the reason of a man who stares too long into a stone. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, that history is a solved puzzle bound neatly in a leather spine. But this is a comfortable and extravagant lie. Stand at the edge of this silence, with the wind carving layers off your skin, and you feel the clockwork of civilization shudder and stop. Perhaps the deepest wisdom is to accept that the circles are not an unfinished sentence, but a complete poem written in a grammar too old for the human brain to parse. We, in our frantic age, scan the earth for resources, for data. But these stones demand a resource we have nearly lost, the capacity for deep, unknowing reverence. The desert moves to reclaim everything. The black basalt weathers invisibly, a micron per millennium, as the sand planes everything smooth in its slow, patient hunger. One distant morning, long after our own skyscrapers have crumbled into reefs of rust, these circles will still be faintly visible from the sky. They will outlast our languages and our digital ghosts, surviving as the sole autograph of a species that felt the need to organize dark matter into a silent prayer. The legacy of the black stone circles is not a solution, but a mirror held up to the eternal abyss inside the modern mind. We are just as driven by ritual and cosmic anxiety as the Stone Age hunter. We just pour our fears into binary code instead of basalt boulders. You came here searching for an answer, something you could hold and classify. But the desert has given you a far more unsettling gift. It has given you a sensory proof of the absolute limits of human knowing, an actual physical border drawn in chunks of cooled magma. Look one last time at the central stone as the sun drops like a molten blade into the veil of the west. The blackness of the rock absorbs the final light without a glint of reflection, a dead zone in the spectrum, a pupil staring back into the cosmos. That dark aperture is not a tomb. It is a door that swings on hinges of wonder, a door that has been patiently waiting for someone to pause and simply look. We cannot interview the builders. We cannot decipher the liturgy, and we cannot assign a neat functional label to a monument of the soul. The mystery endures because it must. It serves as a guardian to the unknown, a sentinel that reminds us we are tiny, transient, and trapped within a single slice of time. As you walk away, your own footprints in the black dust will erase with the night's first gust, but the circle remains, weighty and absolute. It will stand there while the constellations pivot above it in their slow, grinding procession through an epoch of silence that we cannot begin to fathom. And somewhere deep in your own mind, a new black stone has been planted, the unsettling, glorious, and profound certainty that some secrets will never, ever be told.